Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in the complex, demanding, and, well, profoundly versatile career of a musician who operates constantly at the intersection of rock royalty and deep creative experimentation.
We're examining Josh Klinghoffer. Born in Santa Monica, California back in 1979, Klinghoffer isn't just, a musician. He is an absolute musical force, someone whose biography reads like a list of legendary collaborations.
Yeah, it really does.
He masters guitar, vocals, drums, bass, and keyboards. He's truly the definition of a multi-instrumentalist who can fill pretty much any role in any band, it seems, at any time.
And the high-profile element that really anchors his spot in history, the immediate shock factor
Right.
for many people. Klinghoffer spent a pivotal decade from 2009 to 2019 as the lead guitarist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Right, a huge band.
That tenure, despite its eventual dramatic end, absolutely ensured his permanent place in the rock canon.
Indeed. And because of the work he did with the Chili Peppers, he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2012.
At what age was that again?
He was only 32 years old at the time of his induction, which, for a brief period, made him the youngest inductee ever. Quite an astonishing feat, really, for a musician whose career was arguably only just hitting its stride in the, mainstream spotlight.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to track that winding, fascinating path. We need to understand how a self-described music dork who dropped out of high school became, well, the confidant of John Frusciante, then the lead guitarist for Stadium Rockers, and now the trusted session player for icons like Iggy Pop and Eddie Vedder. It's quite a journey.
It really is, and we'll explore his intensive solo work as a Pluralone and with Dot Hacker, which reveals his true creative voice outside those established bands. We'll also delve into the technical complexity of his unique sound, his gear, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And finally, we need to provide a careful fact-based context on the deeply serious personal and legal challenge he faced in 2024. Ultimately, we are tracking a career defined by this constant balancing act between being the loyal, supportive collaborator and, on the other hand, the autonomous, prolific creator.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The sheer versatility Klinghoffer displays, it seems to stem directly from his formative years, doesn't it? This wasn't a musician who came up rigidly trained in just one discipline.
No, not at all. He was primarily self-taught. That's really the crucial context here. He did take formal drum lessons starting around age 9, which obviously gave him a fundamental understanding of rhythm.
Which is key.
Absolutely. But the instruments that really defined his collaborative work later on, the guitar and the keyboards, he taught himself. He describes his approach as basically dropping out of formal education at 15 to pursue music because, well, that was the only thing that mattered to him.
And he embraced that image of the young obsessive, didn't he? Which is probably key to developing such broad instrumental fluency.
Right. He recalled himself as the little music dork who lived around the corner, just playing guitar all day long. When you spend that much time immersed in sound, not necessarily structured by a curriculum, you develop unique muscle memory and I think a genuine understanding of how various instruments interact. It's a different kind of learning.
Yeah, a more organic way, maybe.
Exactly. And that intensive self-driven study allowed him to rapidly transition into his first professional venture. In 1997, at just 17, he joined The Bicycle Thief.
17?
Yeah. This was the project spearheaded by Bob Forrest, the charismatic but often, troubled frontman of Thelonious Monster.
Right, I remember them. So this collaboration was his baptism by fire, really, resulting in his first professional recording experience on the album You Come and Go Like a Pop Song.
That's the one. And what's interesting here is that Forrest had a reputation for finding these deeply talented yet often volatile musicians.
And this is where the RHCP connection surfaces really early on, isn't it?
It is. Anthony Kiedis, RHCP's vocalist who was friends with Forrest, actually noted and praised Forrest's knack for finding extremely talented and down-to-earth people. That's a direct reference in part to Klinghoffer's arrival on the scene. It signals that the rock elite recognized his potential pretty much immediately.
But the environment around Bob Forrest was notoriously fraught with substance abuse issues, wasn't it? That had previously derailed Thelonious Monster's potential. Klinghoffer's early view on this is quite revealing of his focused personality.
It really speaks to his pragmatism and perhaps his focus on the craft over the chaos. Despite working closely with Forrest, Klinghoffer was apparently very clear that he wasn't interested in that lifestyle. He stated confidently, even back then, that he wasn't going to be the next Bob Forrest. He was there for the music, determined not to let the pitfalls of the rock scene derail his intense musical ambition.
Which is pretty mature for a teenager, really.
Very. But the pivotal moment of the Bicycle Thief era wasn't just the record itself or even navigating that scene. It was a connection made during the sessions.
Ah, right.
The band needed a specific guitar solo on the track Rain's Falling, and the person who came into the studio to record it was John Frusciante.
Who was at that time firmly back and entrenched in the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Exactly. And that connection changed everything. Klinghoffer was 17, Frusciante was already a global superstar. They immediately bonded over music, started hanging out constantly at Frusciante's home, listening to records, sharing ideas.
Just soaking it all up, I imagine.
Pretty much. And that seemingly casual friendship quickly evolved into one of the most creatively intense partnerships in, well, 21st century rock music.
So this deep partnership, it blossomed into collaborative writing around 2002, right? Culminating in a series of releases that often blur the definition between a solo record and a dual project.
Yeah, it gets complicated there. Let's look at Shadows Collide with People, which came out in 2004. It was initially planned as a collaborative band album, but it ultimately became credited as a Frusciante solo record.
But Klinghoffer was all over it.
Absolutely. His fingerprints are everywhere. They shared the writing process extensively. Take a song like Omission, for example. They developed the keyboard and guitar ideas together before each penning their own vocal parts. Frusciante described Klinghoffer's contributions as fitting perfectly into his vision.
The sources really convey the intensity of this bond. Frusciante referred to Klinghoffer as one of the very few people who I really like to spend a lot of time with, and the person closest to him, valuing his opinion above almost all others.
It wasn't just a professional relationship, clearly. It was a musical brotherhood, a deep creative dependency, you could almost say.
And you see that dependency reflected in the sheer volume of output during that period.
Totally. From 2004 onwards, Klinghoffer was just indispensable to Frusciante's solo work. He contributed significantly across albums like The Will to Death, Inside of Emptiness, and The Empyrean.
And not just guitar, right?
Oh no, he wasn't just the guitarist. He was providing drums, bass, vocals, keyboards, basically whatever the song demanded. A real multi-instrumental force in that partnership.
The level of intertwining was so high that in 2004 they released a Sphere in the Heart of Silence, which was explicitly credited to both musicians.
Right. And on that album, Klinghoffer really steps out more, handling lead vocals on several tracks, taking control of synthesizers and sequencing. It feels much more like an equal partnership record.
And that experimentation extended even further into the realm of the truly avant-garde with the band Ataxia.
Ataxia, yes. This was a trio formed by Klinghoffer on drums, Frusciante on guitar and vocals, and the legendary Fugazi bassist Joe Lally. This project is vital for understanding Klinghoffer's full scope.
So what was the sound of Ataxia? How did Klinghoffer's drumming in that context differ from, say, Chad Smith's powerhouse drumming in RHCP?
Worlds apart. Ataxia was sparse, improvisational, and deeply atmospheric. Almost drone rock, maybe closer to krautrock or post-punk than anything Frusciante had done solo or with the Chili Peppers. Klinghoffer's drumming had to be highly textured and patient. He was providing these long, sustained rhythms, often focusing on atmosphere rather than a driving groove. It's a completely different discipline than laying down a funk rock beat, you know?
Yeah, totally different feel.
They released Automatic Writing in 2004 and then AEW3 in 2007. The fact that he could seamlessly swap from being a lead guitar player in one context to this kind of nuanced experimental drumming in another is a huge marker of his skill and adaptability.
So while this deep bond with Frusciante was clearly his main focus for several years, he was simultaneously establishing himself as an incredibly reliable and versatile gun for hire in the broader Los Angeles music scene.
He was everywhere.
Yeah.
Seriously. He joined the band Golden Shoulders in 2002, and his relationship with them actually continues to the present day.
Still going?
Yep. And if you look at his credits across their albums, like Let My Burden Be, Friendship is Deep, Get Reasonable, he literally played everything.
Sure.
Bass, drums, mellotron, organ, piano, electric guitar. He's the ultimate utility player for them.
Wow. And this leads directly to his first major touring role outside the Frusciante sphere, which was with Gnarls Barkley, right?
That's the one. From 2006 to 2008, he toured and recorded with CeeLo Green and Danger Mouse's massive project. He contributed to their second album, The Odd Couple, in 2008.
And that touring experience, navigating the demands of a high-profile, non-rock environment, That was important.
Crucial. It was the final piece of the puzzle, really.
Yeah.
It placed him in close proximity to the right people, gave him that big tour experience, and that Gnarls Barkley touring role was the immediate conduit, the direct link to his first job with the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
It really shows how every single collaboration, even the seemingly minor side projects, ultimately served as a stepping stone, building towards that top tier of rock music.
Absolutely. Nothing was wasted experience.
Okay, let's unpack this high-profile entry. Klinghoffer's move into the Red Hot Chili Peppers was fascinating because it wasn't an immediate replacement situation, was it? It started slowly, almost like a trial run.
That's right. It began during the final legs of the Stadium Arcadium tour back in 2007. He was brought in as an auxiliary musician.
So what did that mean exactly? Auxiliary.
It meant he wasn't replacing Frusciante at that point. He was supplementing the sound. He played additional guitar parts, sang backing vocals, and handled important keyboard flourishes that had become part of the RHCP live experience.
Stuff that was maybe too complex for Frusciante to handle alone while doing lead guitar and vocals.
Precisely. It allowed the band to play their increasingly complex studio material accurately live. He was filling out the sound.
Okay, so the real transition began in earnest in 2009. John Frusciante had privately quit the band earlier that year, but the public didn't know yet. Then, in May 2009, we get this curious performance at a MusiCares benefit.
Ah, yes, the Insects. Kiedis, Flea, Chad Smith, and Klinghoffer performed together, but under that pseudonym.
Why the pseudonym? Was it just a bit of fun or something more?
It was likely the de facto public audition, or at least a way to signal that something had changed without making a huge announcement. Performing together, even with other guests like Ron Wood joining in, showed the core remaining members were comfortable with Klinghoffer integrating into their dynamic on stage.
A soft launch, maybe?
Kind of. And by January 2010, he performed his first show as the band's lead guitarist, covering Neil Young, I believe. The official announcement that he was the replacement followed soon after.
And Klinghoffer immediately articulated his attraction to the band, not just in terms of fame or opportunity, but in terms of structure and bond. He said he was drawn to the idea of a tight-knit unit, a band of family, a brotherhood.
Yeah, and given the intensity of his previous relationship with Frusciante, it seems he was perhaps looking to replicate that sense of deep musical camaraderie, but maybe in a more stable, long-term structure.
Which makes sense. RHCP definitely projects that image.
Absolutely. He was seeking a permanent home within a family structure, which is exactly what RHCP represents, a brotherhood forged over decades. However, he was joining a band with decades of history defined in large part by the sound of the very guitarist he was replacing.
Yeah, that's a tough spot.
And that immediately presented creative challenges, most notably during the recording of the first album with him, I'm With You, which came out in 2011.
That album was a massive undertaking, wasn't it? 11 months of writing and rehearsal before they even started recording.
Yeah, a long process. And the question was, how would Klinghoffer's style, which was generally more layered, more atmospheric, rooted in experimental and electronic sounds, impact the sound of RHCP, which was historically known for that explosive funk rock energy?
And did it? Was the shift noticeable?
Oh, definitely. Where Frusciante's playing was often angular, explosive, very rooted in blues and Hendrix, Klinghoffer brought a more textured, almost post-punk sensibility sometimes. And You features less aggressive funk overall and more atmospheric, sometimes synth-heavy tracks.
And his contributions weren't just guitar.
No, he contributed vocals, music writing, keyboards, and his guitar playing often favored effects, creating ambience and complexity rather than just raw soloing power. It was a different approach.
He had to find his voice within a sound that was already legendary, which sounds incredibly difficult. And this is where we run into the first sign of creative tension, maybe. Klinghoffer admitted he felt like the odd man out during the With You sessions with longtime RHCP producer Rick Rubin.
That tension really speaks to the weight of history, I think. Rick Rubin had produced every single RHCP album since Blood Sugar Sex Magik in '91. Rubin and the core trio Kiedis, Flea, Smith shared a decades-long creative language.
Right, they had a shorthand.
Exactly. Klinghoffer, the newest member trying to maybe establish a slightly new sound, understandably felt like an outsider in that established process. He even stated later he initially did not want to work with Rubin again on the next album, preferring a relationship perhaps defined by less historical baggage.
So they eventually released The Getaway in 2016, which featured a new dynamic because it was produced by Danger Mouse, not Rick Rubin. Did that change in producer alleviate some of that creative tension?
It definitely changed the sound again, moving them further into a more polished, maybe even pop-oriented sensibility at times. Danger Mouse is known for highly layered, meticulous production.
Right.
The recording process itself was complicated because Flea suffered a serious skiing injury, which paused production for months. But the resulting album, The Getaway, I think you hear Klinghoffer settling into his role more. He contributes some excellent melodic work, and his keyboard skills are maybe even more prominent.
Okay. Despite the internal complexities and, let's face it, the incredibly high bar set by his predecessor, the Hall of Fame induction in 2012 must have solidified his immediate historic contribution.
Yeah.
He was validated by the institution of rock history itself.
It was a massive validation, no question, placing him alongside the very legends he had grown up listening to and then collaborating with. But history, especially in this band's context, seems to move in cycles. The end of his tenure came quite suddenly, just over a month after their final show with him in November 2019.
On December 15th, 2019, the band announced Klinghoffer was parting ways, and, in the same breath, that John Frusciante was rejoining. The public statement was very complimentary, expressing love and respect for Josh.
Very gracious, yes.
But we need to delve deeper into Klinghoffer's actual personal reaction, which he detailed quite candidly in interviews later, particularly with Mark Maron and Rolling Stone.
The sources reveal a profound mixture of shock and resignation, maybe. He recounted the meeting with the band at Flea's house where they told him. He described it as really sweet, noting that it was mostly Flea talking. He also observed Kiedis's pain, describing him as a very tender and supportive person, which indicates how difficult the core members found delivering the news.
But the truly defining quote was his reaction. He said he was shocked, but not surprised. Why that cognitive dissonance? How can you be both?
Well, he explained he wasn't surprised because he was aware, or at least had heard, that Frusciante had been jamming with Flea privately again. And Kiedis had also apparently reestablished contact, so he kind of saw the writing on the wall, maybe felt the tide turning.
Oh, okay.
When the news was finally delivered, he apparently just sat there and said, "I'm not surprised." It was a recognition, perhaps, that despite his decade of loyalty and contribution, the band's central creative axis, Flea and John, had naturally realigned.
His emotional response really humanizes the situation, though. He told the band, according to his interview, "I wish I could have done something with you guys, musically or creatively, that would have made this an absolute impossibility."
Wow. That quote speaks volumes, doesn't it, about his desire for creative permanence, for a relationship so vital that it couldn't be easily disrupted by history or past dynamics.
Yeah. Yet he remained incredibly philosophical and honestly quite gracious about Frusciante's return in his public statements.
He did. He admitted he felt it was absolutely John's place to be in that band, due to the immense history. He openly stated, "John and Flea have a musical language. I'll never be able to contend with the history him and John had." He was acutely aware that his decade of work couldn't just erase the decades of established brotherhood and sonic identity that came before him.
Given that immense pressure and the way it ended, how did he ultimately assess his own work with them, looking back?
He expressed pride in the effort. He stated, "Now, after 10 years, 2 tours, and almost 3 albums of writing, I'm really proud of what I did with them. I feel like we did create something," which they did.
Right. 2 full albums and a lot of touring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
However, his honesty also extended to his artistic reservations. He did admit he was not particularly fond of the 2 records he made with the band.
Really? That's quite a statement.
Yeah, perhaps stemming from that feeling of being creatively compromised sometimes, or feeling like an outsider during parts of the production process, especially with Rubin on the first one.
And this leads us to the final, maybe most painful complexity of the aftermath. His relationship with Frusciante himself. They had shared such an intimate musical brotherhood for years before the RHCP tenure. Did that bond survive the professional rivalry and the replacement situation?
Unfortunately, it seems not. While Klinghoffer maintained no public animosity towards Kiedis, Flea, or Smith, in fact, quite the opposite, he stated quite clearly in June 2022 that his friendship with Frusciante was, quote, non-existent.
Wow. Non-existent.
Yeah. And he revealed they had not spoken in over 10 years, which means that relationship had effectively dissolved before Frusciante even rejoined the band. The dynamics of their intersecting careers, the shared spotlight, maybe the pressure of the replacement, it had evidently created a gulf that neither musician had managed to bridge.
That's genuinely sad, considering the brilliant experimental music they made together earlier on.
It is a sad coda to that partnership. But if the firing was the end of one chapter, it immediately sparked a creative explosion in the next, demonstrating that Klinghoffer's drive was far from diminished. If anything, it was ignited.
Yeah, the immediate aftermath of the RACP departure was defined by this, well, unbelievable surge in creative output. It was almost as if Klinghoffer had been holding back years of material or ideas. He instantly focused on his primary solo outlet, Pluralone.
Which he had actually launched just months before the firing announcement in 2019, right?
That's correct. The timing was interesting. And Pluralone, which was originally a working title for his other band, Hacker, became the vehicle for his most personal, uncompromising work.
And his debut single, under this moniker, released in August 2019, gives us a great insight into his global musical palette, doesn't it?
It really does. The single was Io sono quel ci sono, backed with Menina Mujer da Pele Preta. It featured covers of the iconic Italian singer Mina and the legendary Brazilian artist Jorge Ben.
So not your typical rock covers. Not at all. The choice of covers signals his deep appreciation for non-English language music, highly melodic, emotionally resonant stuff. And what's crucial is that for these tracks, Klinghoffer performed every single instrument and vocal part himself. Pluralone is essentially Klinghoffer unleashed, operating as his own orchestra.
And he immediately followed up with 3 solo albums in pretty quick succession. To Be One With You in late 2019, I Don't Feel Well in 2020, and This Is the Show in 2022. Was this entirely isolated work, or did he pull from his RHCP circle for support?
Well, the musical bonds were clearly stronger than any professional rift might suggest. His debut album, To Be One With You, actually featured guest appearances from Flea.
Oh, interesting.
And Jack Irons, the original RHCP drummer and Pearl Jam alum, and also former Jane's Addiction bassist Eric Avery.
So still very much connected to that world.
Yeah, it shows that while he was stepping out decisively on his own creatively, he maintained deep respect and active collaboration with the RHCP family members who supported his solo vision. The firing wasn't a total severing of ties, musically speaking.
Okay. Parallel to Pluralone, we have Hacker. This is the alternative rock band he founded way back in 2008, where he acts as the primary songwriter, singer, rhythm guitarist, and pianist. How does Hacker differ tonally from the Pluralone material?
Hacker is definitely a true band format. It features former Gnarls Barkley touring musicians Jonathan Hischke, Clint Walsh, Eric Gardner. Stylistically, it's much more focused on moody, atmospheric, alternative rock. You might think Radiohead meets post-rock, maybe. Lots of layered guitars and synthesizers.
Right.
Pluralone, conversely, feels more like a direct conduit for Klinghoffer's most eclectic influences, often sounding more like a singer-songwriter record played by a single polymath. Hacker has a solid discography too, including Inhibition back in 2012, the 2-part album series How's Your Process, Work and How's Your Process, Play in 2014, and N3 in 2017.
So he's got these 2 distinct outlets for his own music. But moving from his own bands, let's discuss the next major step in his collaborative career, the Pearl Jam connection, which started around 2020.
Yeah, this started innocently enough, actually. Pluralone was originally scheduled to open for Pearl Jam's Gigaton tour.
Oh, okay.
Of course, COVID-19 postponed those initial plans, but Pearl Jam clearly recognized his unique skill set, and when touring eventually resumed, they offered him a far more integrated role within their live setup.
His debut as a touring member of Pearl Jam came in September 2021. What specific role did they need him to fill? I mean, they're already a pretty established 5-piece lineup.
Well, he was brought on specifically as a multi-instrumentalist to help flesh out the new material from the Gigaton album Live. That album is sonically very dense and layered.
Right, lots going on there.
Exactly. Pearl Jam needed someone who could handle additional guitars, keyboards, backing vocals, even some percussion, without being constrained to just one instrument. He was essentially their auxiliary player, kind of mirroring his initial role with the Red Hot Chili Peppers years before, but in a band environment where he seemed to fit in and flourish almost instantly.
And this leads to arguably the most incredible showcase of his versatility in recent years, the emergency drumming gig.
Oh, that was astounding. On September 13th, 2023, Pearl Jam's longtime drummer, the amazing Matt Cameron, unfortunately contracted COVID-19 just before a show.
Right, what do you do then? Cancel.
Well, instead of canceling, Klinghoffer stepped up. He played drums for the entire set.
The whole set on drums.
The whole set, showcasing his proficiency not just on the guitar and keys, but on the instrument where his formal training actually began decades earlier. I mean, think about it. How many lead guitarists for Hall of Fame bands are capable of seamlessly filling in as the drummer for another legendary act mid-tour? It's almost unheard of.
That's incredible adaptability. Makes him invaluable.
Totally. An invaluable asset to the entire Pearl Jam family, really. And it extended beyond the main band. He also performed on Eddie Vedder's 2022 solo album, Earthling, and toured as a key member of Vedder's backing band, the Earthlings.
His session work in the early 2020s essentially confirms him as probably the most in-demand utility player in high-profile rock music right now. He has the technical skill, the adaptability, and clearly the professional reliability.
He really does. Let's just look at the sheer weight of his recent collaborations. He appeared on 7 songs and co-wrote 2 for Iggy Pop's fantastic 2023 album, Every Loser.
It must have been amazing working with Iggy.
Absolutely. And he joined Pop's stellar backing band for that project, The Losers, which is basically a modern rock supergroup. It featured his old RHCP rhythm partner, Chad Smith.
Ah, cool.
Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses, and the producer Andrew Watt, who also played guitar. For Every Loser, Klinghoffer brought his unique textures and layers to complement Pop's raw energy, demonstrating his ability to be both supportive and subtle, even in a high-octane punk environment.
And his continued partnership with Chad Smith outside of RHCP, they were in Iggy Pop's band together, and now they're working as the rhythm section for Elton John and Brandi Carlile. That suggests a deep, ongoing musical connection, independent of their former band structure, doesn't it?
Absolutely it does. Those rhythm section bonds, drummer and multi-instrumentalist bassists, are often incredibly strong. Their continued professional relationship speaks volumes about Klinghoffer's stability, reliability, and just his sheer musical compatibility with Chad.
We also saw him step in as touring guitarist for Jane's Addiction in 2023 and early 2024, right? Filling in for Dave Navarro, who was ill.
Yep. And his integration was apparently so complete that he even earned writing credit on the band's 2024 single, True Love, which is quite something for a temporary fill-in.
Definitely shows his contribution went beyond just playing the parts.
Oh.
Looking ahead, his slate remains packed. In 2024, he produced and performed on Red Cross's self-titled album.
And looking toward 2025, the collaboration with Elton John and Brandi Carlile on the forthcoming album, Who Believes in Angels, is a huge project. As we mentioned, he and Chad Smith provided the entire backing band for this record and subsequent CBS television special performances. It's hard to imagine a more prestigious or stylistically different cross-genre assignment than going from Iggy Pop to Elton John.
It really is. The narrative post-RHCP seems to be one of professional liberation, almost. He went from being the new guy in one massive band to being the indispensable glue holding 3 or 4 legendary bands or projects together simultaneously, all while running 2 of his own distinct creative projects on the side.
Prolific doesn't even begin to cover it.
Okay, so given the sheer range of musical genres Klinghoffer covers, from sparse art rock with Ataxia to stadium funk with RHCP and punk with Iggy Pop, his gear setup must be incredibly robust, right? Able to handle extreme sonic shifts.
Oh, definitely. He is a collector, we know that, but his heart, particularly for his main lead and rhythm work, seems to remain with Fender Stratocasters.
Why the Stratocaster preference, specifically? I mean, John Frusciante was also famously a Strat guy. Is it loyalty to that sound, or something inherent in the guitar itself?
It's likely primarily the sonic quality and versatility. The Stratocaster is arguably the most versatile electric guitar ever made. Its 3 pickups allow for everything from sharp, trebly funk tones on the bridge pickup to smooth, smoky blues or rock sounds on the neck pickup.
And the middle positions, too.
Exactly, the in-between sounds. Plus, Strats generally take effects pedals exceptionally well, which is crucial for him. This adaptability is key for a musician who needs to cover everything from textural ambient soundscapes to straight-ahead rock solos, often within a single set or even a single song.
Let's detail some of his memorable touring instruments. He had a habit of naming them, which I always find a great touch of personality.
Yeah, it shows a connection. He often tours with a couple of key vintage instruments. Dashiell, which is a Sunburst 1960 Stratocaster, and Chick, a Sunburst 1959 Stratocaster. These vintage instruments possess that distinct tonal resonance, that vibe that modern reissues often strive for but can't quite replicate.
Then there's Gus, right? A black 1974 Stratocaster. What's special about Gus?
Well, the interesting thing about Gus, according to the sources, is that it has a hardtail bridge.
Okay, what's the significance of a hardtail bridge on a Strat? Most have the tremolo, the whammy bar.
Right. Most Stratocasters have that synchronized tremolo system. It's great for dive bombs and subtle vibrato, but it can sometimes make the guitar go out of tune more easily, especially with heavy use, and arguably sacrifices a bit of sustain compared to a fixed bridge. A hardtail bridge is fixed no whammy bar. It offers far better tuning stability and tends to increase sustain and maybe add a bit more punch to the notes. For a versatile player like Klinghoffer, who relies heavily on complex effects chains and needs rock-solid tuning stability throughout a long show, a hardtail Strat is a really pragmatic, reliable choice for certain songs or sounds.
Makes sense. And we absolutely must mention the 1967 Sunburst Telecaster. The sources indicate this was a personal gift from John Frusciante back in the day.
Yeah, that guitar is a tangible link to their shared history and that intense early bond. Even amidst their reported personal estrangement later on, this instrument, which Klinghoffer has used throughout his career, represents that shared musical foundation.
And sonically, the Telecaster offers something different from the Strat, doesn't it?
Completely. The Telecaster provides a different tonal palette, typically twangier, more mid-focused, maybe a bit more raw and cutting than a Strat. It adds another essential dimension to his sonic arsenal.
He also showcases his penchant for the unusual, the quirky. The sources mention his use of a Soviet-era electric guitar, the Ural 650A. Why on earth use a notoriously cheap, mass-produced, and often problematic instrument like that in a high-stakes arena setting?
Huh. Well, the Ural 650A is almost universally known for its, let's say, characterful build quality. But sometimes that perceived failure generates a unique sound.
How so?
They often have these high-output, microphonic pickups and unpredictable electronics that can create unusual harmonic overtones, bizarre fuzz tones, unexpected feedback, and general noise, a kind of sonic chaos that you just can't replicate with standard vintage gear or modern boutique pedals.
So it's intentional weirdness.
Exactly. For experimental textures, for avant-garde sounds, the Ural is likely an intentional choice for its specific weirdness and character. It proves Klinghoffer seeks specific tones and textures, not just prestigious brand names or vintage perfection. He's looking for the right sound for the part, wherever it comes from.
Now, if his guitars are the palette, his effects pedal board is the laboratory.
Yeah.
It's reportedly constantly changing, evolving. But examining his 2017 setup during the RHCP era gives us a fascinating glimpse into his complex sonic philosophy. He uses effects not just for color, but as an integral part of his compositions and live performance.
Absolutely. They're not just sprinkled on top, they're foundational. Let's look at his delay section from around that time. He was using the Catalan-bred CSI Diamond, which is a glitch stutter delay pedal, alongside the absolute classic Electro Harmonix Deluxe Memory Man.
Okay, what's the contrast there? Why both?
Well, the Memory Man is an iconic pedal. It's an organic, warm analog delay, famous for its lush chorus and vibrato effects on the repeats, and that natural tape-like degradation. It's classic, melodic, beautiful. The CSI Man, conversely, is kind of chaos in a box. It allows him to introduce digital errors, stutters, unpredictable rhythmic skips and jumps, bringing in those noise and glitch elements that are really essential for his Pluralone and dot hacker textures, but also surprisingly useful for atmospheric parts in some RHCP or even Pearl Jam songs. So Beauty and the Beast, side by side.
And for his core tone, the dirt or overdrive sounds, we see both boutique choices and highly sought-after pedals. He uses things like the Death by Audio Interscolor overdriver and the Exotic Effects EP booster, but the star of the show for many pedal nerds would be the Klon Centaur.
The Klon, yes. It's legendary in the guitar world. It's one of the most famous, collectible, and frankly, expensive overdrive pedals ever made.
Why? What makes it so special?
It's valued not really for massive distortion, but for providing this incredibly transparent, highly nuanced mid-range boost that retains the natural character of the guitar and the amp beautifully. It just makes things sound bigger and better.
So it's about clarity, not just gain.
Exactly. Using the Klon ensures that when he hits a solo or needs to push the front end of his amplifier harder, his tone gets bigger and clearer, cuts through the mix, but doesn't just turn into mushy fuzz. It speaks to his reliance on clarity and articulation even within complex sounds.
In terms of modulation effects, chorus, vibrato, that sort of thing, he uses classic Boss pedals like the VB2 vibrato and the CE2 chorus, alongside more modern digital reverbs like the EHX Cathedral. But again, it's sometimes the weird stuff that stands out functionally, particularly the Electro Harmonix B9 organ machine.
The B9 organ machine is functionally critical for his touring role, especially when he's the auxiliary player. It allows him to convincingly emulate the sound of a classic B3 organ using his guitar.
So he can play organ parts without needing a keyboard right there.
Precisely. When he's playing guitar on a track that also requires a keyboard layer, which is true for almost every song on the RHCP albums he played on, I'm With You and The Getaway, and certainly many Gigaton tracks with Pearl Jam the B9 provides that missing texture while his hands are busy on the guitar neck.
That's a genius workaround.
It really is. It allows him to execute those multi-layered studio parts live, proving exactly why he is so indispensable as an auxiliary musician who can cover multiple sonic roles simultaneously.
Finally, let's look at his amplifiers. Despite the obvious complexity of the pedal board, his amp setup, at least as reported around 2017, was relatively straightforward but highly effective. A dual amp split.
Yeah, a classic technique for big stages. He was reportedly using a vintage 1970s Marshall Major for his low end and a Fender Tone Master for his high end.
Bi-amping, why do that?
This bi-amping setup allows him to cover the full frequency spectrum with real precision and power. The Marshall Major is a vintage beast known for massive volume and that powerful low-end grunt, which is essential for filling an arena and giving the sound weight. The Fender Tone Master, on the other hand, is known more for its clarity, its headroom, and its sparkling high frequencies. Think classic Fender clean tones. By splitting his signal between these two amps, he ensures that his complex affected sounds retain both their punch and low-end foundation via the Marshall, and their clarity, articulation, and treble definition via the Fender. It's a sophisticated solution for achieving maximum sonic impact and versatility on a big stage.
As we transition into the final segment of our deep dive today, we do need to address the serious personal matter that occurred in 2024. This is obviously a difficult subject, and it requires careful, impartial reporting, sticking strictly to the known facts from our sources.
Absolutely. The goal here is context and factual clarity, nothing more. The incident occurred on March 18, 2024, in Alhambra, California. Josh Klinghoffer was driving a black GMC Yukon when he was involved in a vehicular collision.
The victim, tragically, was 47-year-old Israel Sanchez, who was using a pedestrian crossing at the time. The reports state Klinghoffer made a left turn, colliding with Mr. Sanchez.
Yes. And Mr. Sanchez sustained blunt force trauma injuries and devastatingly died only hours later in the hospital.
The immediate aftermath, according to the sources, was marked by conflicting narratives and some strong allegations being made public. Initial police information, as reported, indicated two key complicating factors. One, that Klinghoffer may have been on his cell phone at the time of the incident, and two, that the vehicle he was driving reportedly had no license plates displayed.
Right, and Mr. Sanchez's family, understandably grief-stricken, retained an attorney who quickly filed a civil suit and was very public with his statements. He alleged that Klinghoffer was indeed on his phone and failed to utilize his brakes adequately. The attorney went so far as to state publicly that Klinghoffer should be arrested and prosecuted for homicide.
Which is a very serious allegation. However, Klinghoffer's legal representation maintained from the start that he acted responsibly immediately after the collision occurred.
That's correct. His attorney stated that Klinghoffer immediately pulled over, stopped the vehicle, called 911 himself to report the incident, and cooperated fully with all authorities when they arrived on the scene.
The legal distinction between the charges potentially sought by the family's attorney and those ultimately filed by the state prosecutors is crucial here for maintaining proper context. In August 2024, Klinghoffer was formally charged with vehicular manslaughter without gross negligence.
Okay, we need to maybe define that term a little. Vehicular manslaughter without gross negligence is categorized as a misdemeanor in California. This charge generally implies a failure to exercise ordinary care while driving, things like failure to yield the right-of-way, or perhaps distraction, like being on a cell phone, could fall under this.
But crucially, it does not imply reckless conduct or violent intent, right?
Correct. A charge of gross negligence, which is much more serious and carries far stiffer penalties potentially, including prison time, would imply a more extreme deviation from a reasonable standard of care, basically.
Yeah.
Acting recklessly with conscious disregard for human life. The misdemeanor charge he faced carried a maximum penalty of 1 year in county jail and a fine.
So the charge itself, filed by the district attorney's office, reflected their legal conclusion that while his failure to operate his vehicle carefully tragically caused a death, it was not classified under the law as criminally reckless homicide.
That appears to be the legal assessment reflected in the charge filed. Klinghoffer pleaded not guilty to the charge initially in September 2024. However, the case was resolved several months later in May 2025 via a plea deal.
Okay, what was the outcome of that deal?
He pleaded no contest to the misdemeanor charge. A no contest plea means the defendant doesn't admit guilt but accepts the conviction and punishment. Crucially, this deal allowed him to avoid any jail time.
And what were the final terms of the sentencing based on that plea deal?
The sentencing included 1 year of informal probation, 60 days of community labor, often referred to as community service, mandatory completion of a driver safety class, and importantly, an order to pay restitution to the victim's family. The amount of restitution is often determined later.
So the outcome reflects the serious nature of the charge, acknowledging the tragic loss of life, while aligning with the legal finding of lack of gross negligence.
Precisely. It is also important to reiterate, as the sources note, that this legal chapter is not completely closed. The victim's family is proceeding with the civil legal avenues they initiated earlier. They filed a civil suit against Klinghoffer seeking damages for negligence and wrongful death. The next hearing in that ongoing civil case is reportedly scheduled for July 1st, 2025.
Right. So the criminal aspect is resolved via the plea deal, but the civil lawsuit continues.
Exactly. This entire tragic incident serves as a stark reminder that even individuals operating at the very pinnacle of creative success are, of course, subject to profound and sometimes heartbreaking personal crises that inevitably intersect with their professional lives and public image. Hashtag outro.
As we conclude this deep dive, we're left with this image, really, of a musician defined by extraordinary duality. On one side, Josh Klinghoffer is the quintessential loyal collaborator, isn't he? The ultimate utility player who effortlessly elevated the work of legends, Frusciante, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Eddie Vedder, Iggy Poppin, and earned that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction for his crucial role in one of those bands.
But then on the other side, he is the fiercely autonomous creator. Through Pluralone and Dot Hacker, he demonstrates that he is a truly prolific songwriter with a global perspective and an eclectic, often uncompromising creative voice entirely his own. His career isn't really about one specific sound, is it? It's about relentless, multi-genre contribution rooted in this deep appreciation for musical structure, texture, and composition.
Yeah. The sources show a musician whose emotional investment in the idea of musical brotherhood seems really intense, whether those bonds prove unbreakable, like perhaps with Chad Smith or Flea, or become severely strained, as sadly happened with John Frusciante. His adaptability, moving from lead guitar to covering drums for Pearl Jam, shifting from funk rock to experimental drone, that adaptability is truly his signature achievement, you could argue.
I think you could. And that leads us nicely to our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. Reflect on the constant pressure, the unique balancing act Klinghoffer must navigate. He experienced the professional pain, the sting of being replaced in a legendary band, only to immediately find immense creative freedom and, frankly, huge professional demand, leading his own experimental projects while simultaneously serving as the indispensable session musician for multiple other rock icons.
It's a unique position.
Very. So how does this unique perspective, this constant juggling act between the intense demands of high-level session work and the total creative control of his own solo world, how does that shape his ultimate artistic voice moving forward? Will the lessons learned as a loyal collaborator continue to inform and elevate the autonomous creator inside him? Or will the pull of that autonomy, that complete control, finally push him away from large-scale collaboration entirely? That's the fascinating question we're left with as his complex and incredibly productive career continues to unfold.